The alleged ringleaders were arrested in Toronto this morning and brought back to Quebec to face justice.
It is estimated that more than 500 women have been exploited by this prostitution ring.
The victims are from China and Korea, some of them minors. According to police, an international criminal organization helped the women get into the country, either illegally or with visas obtained through false pretenses. Investigators say they came to Canada on their own free will, but when they arrived, they were forced to work in body houses in cities across the country, from Halifax to Vancouver.
The victims were allegedly exploited for a number of weeks in a particular Canadian location, to be moved later on to other locations.
This way they don't have time to create links with other people outside the prostitution ring. Authorities lose their trace, or family or friends that they make won't find them.
6 of the key players have been arrested and face a variety of charges linked to sexual exploitation. Investigators are still searching for 34-year-old John Juan So of Toronto and 20-year-old Melanie Williams-Johnson of Montreal. Experts say human smuggling is a growing problem.
A few years ago, we didn't see much of this at all. It was fairly rare, but it's really the fastest growing crime, once again, according to the United Nations, in the world.
Police have seized 2 cars and a large amount of cash. Along with computers and cell phones, they hope will reveal the exact number of victims and possibly client lists too. Lisa.
All right, Vanessa Lee in Montreal tonight. Thanks, Vanessa.
The RCMP has broken up a major international human trafficking and prostitution ring. So far, 6 people have been arrested, including 4 in the Montreal area, with 2 more suspects still on the loose tonight. Police also served search warrants in 16 different locations right across Canada. And Stéphane, how was this prostitution ring operating?
Paul, according to the RCMP, the women were mostly from China and Korea, and they were lured to Canada by recruiters who got them in the country under false pretense by passing themselves off as students or visitors. But once they landed, they were immediately taken over by this criminal group, which took them from city to city to work in bawdy houses. They rarely stayed here for more than a few weeks or a few months before being shipped back to their home country. The network was very sophisticated. Some of its leaders lived in Toronto, where 2 arrests were made. We just saw them being taken into custody at St. Hubert Airport this afternoon. 4 more suspects live in Montreal and in Île-Perrot, and 2 more are still wanted by police, including 20-year-old Melanie Williams-Johnson, a Montrealer suspected of acting as a recruiter.
Upon entering Canada, the victims were taken over, controlled and exploited by a prostitution ring operating Canada-wide. The victims were allegedly exploited for a number of weeks in a particular Canadian location, to be moved later on to other locations across the country for the same purpose, and were kept in unspeakable living conditions.
And Steph, was the RCMP able to explain why these women couldn't escape?
No, because the investigation is still ongoing, but they haven't met all the women involved. But experts we spoke to say that the problem is always the same in prostitution. The victims don't speak up because they live in fear, they don't speak the language, and they fear arrest themselves since they know they entered the country illegally.
They don't have paper. Often the pimps will take their papers, so they fear that they can't, if they ever escape, they can't go ask for help because they have no identity. They fear they will be sent back, or maybe they don't even speak the language of the place where they are.
Now the 4 Montreal suspects already appeared in court, and the 2 from Toronto will be formally charged tomorrow at the Montreal courthouse.
All right, thank you very much, Steph. Stéphane Giroux up in the newsroom tonight.
Welcome to CTV News Channel. Well, we have breaking news of arrests in a human smuggling ring linked to an Asian-based international criminal organization. CTV's Stéphane Giroux joins us now from Montreal with the details. Stéphane, what do we know about these cells?
Well, the bust started by the RCMP earlier this week. In fact, most of the accused are set to appear in court tomorrow. What's interesting is that this afternoon, 2 of the suspects were arrested in Toronto, were brought back to Montreal at the St. Hubert Airport. Now, what's interesting to know is that this is an international ring that was based in Montreal and Toronto, and the way they worked is that they would bring Those women, mostly from China and Korea, some were even minors, and they were brought in under false pretense using student visas or visitor's visa. And once in Canada, the network would force them into prostitution, usually a few weeks at a time, all across the country. So they were taken, for example, into Toronto, Montreal, Halifax, Ottawa, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Vancouver. According to the RCMP, they also live in very poor conditions during their stay. They would work mostly in bawdy houses and would be there, would only spend a few weeks or a few months in Canada before they'd be flown back to Asia. The RCMP figures that at least 500 women were involved, but it could be a lot more because they're still going through the evidence that they seized.
All right, and what do you know about the suspects and specifically the charges that they now face?
The suspects are, except for one, they're all of Asian origin. 6 of them lived in Montreal, 2 more in Toronto, and there are 2 more that are still wanted by the RCMP. The charges they're facing involve prostitution-related charges, including living off prostitution, procuring sexual services, but it could be upgraded to gangsterism charges too, and there will be, of course, immigration fraud charges that are expected to follow.
You mentioned that some of these victims have gone back to their home countries, but those that are currently living here, do we know what will happen to them? Will they remain in Canada?
The RCMP were not able to answer that question when I asked them specifically. They say that the investigation is still ongoing, and they don't even know the number of those prostitutes that are in Canada at the, these days. It could be more. Maybe they all went back, so they don't know those answers yet. But what they do have is the data of possibly the customers, the Johns, and 2 of them were already arrested and charged, and they think that they could be able to trace a lot of those customers as they go through that database that they were able to seize.
CTV's Stéphane Giroux on this breaking news, 6 arrests in an alleged human smuggling ring. Thanks so much, Stéphane. Appreciate it.
Investigation targets an Asian-based international criminal organization that is allegedly involved in the smuggling of young women into Canada for sexual exploitation through various bawdy houses across the country. The investigation, dubbed Project Confidence, resulted in 6 arrests and 16 searches. The persons who were arrested are believed to be the key players in this Canada-wide sexual exploitation ring. 2 of the accused are still wanted by the police. One of them allegedly attempted to recruit minors to engage in the activities of this criminal organization. The victims from Korea and China received assistance from that criminal organization to enter Canada illegally with Canadian student or visitor visas obtained through false pretenses. In some cases, they entered Canada illegally through the border. Upon entering Canada, the victims were taken over, controlled and exploited by a prostitution ring operating Canada-wide. The victims were allegedly exploited for a number of weeks in a particular Canadian location, to be moved later onto other locations across the country for the same purpose, and were kept in unspeakable living conditions. After a number of weeks or months, the victims were allegedly returned to their home countries. This ring is believed to operate Canada-wide, with links in Halifax, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Winnipeg, Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver. The exact number of victims is unknown at this time, but it is estimated that more than 500 women have been exploited by this prostitution ring. It is expected that the examination of the computers and cell phones seized from the accused will reveal the exact number of victims and possibly lists of clients. The accused could later face charges under the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, as well as criminal offense charges. The investigation is ongoing.